Don't let this cheap hat deceive you. Underneath this hat lies a brilliant business person. Bernard, this small black child, is a shoe shiner. But take note, he purposefully sets up his stall in front of the bank to attract only wealthy, white individuals as clients. He works slowly so he can listen in on the financial secrets that white people discuss while they wait, and he doesn't give a damn about the little money he makes from polishing shoes. The small child would jot it down in a notepad as soon as they left. Really, all he wants is the important financial advice he received from them. He knew at an early age that being a banker was his lifetime ambition. In 1939, black people in Texas faced extreme prejudice and oppression. Although his father regretfully informs him that his ambition is unattainable, Bernard's eyes convey a will to succeed in spite of everything. After 15 years, the adult boy and his family relocate to Los Angeles, joined by Eunice, his wife, and their kids. He chooses to launch his firm here as the level of racial prejudice is not as great as it is back home. The three-person family is forced to reside in a run-down utility room owned by one of his cousins. Nevertheless, Bernard assures his spouse that they will shortly move away. He works as a real estate agent at first, looking over every home in the city that is for sale. He notices with great insight that there are still a lot of vacant homes in the white neighborhood of Los Angeles, whereas the black community is congested. Black people are financially strong and have renting demands, yet there is no market. This is an excellent economic opportunity for both rental and speculative real estate. He notices a clearly dilapidated apartment occupied by white people, with weeds growing up on the front door. Even still, only he recognizes the benefit of the house's proximity to the black neighborhood. "Why don't you sell it to me? You only rented out half of the apartment," he asks the owner when he approaches him. "I will pay you $30,000 now, and once I rent out every room, I will give you an additional $5,000. While the owner thinks the concept is great, he is not interested in taking on hazardous business. Bernard says that he gets it. He checks at the owner's calendar, which indicates that it was presented by a local bank manager just before he leaves. Thus, a thought occurs to him. After bidding the proprietor farewell, he heads straight to the bank and locates the manager who delivered the calendar there. He is not allowed to be introduced to the manager by the racist secretary of the management. After a few hours of waiting outside the bank entrance, he is abruptly stopped by the manager as he emerges. "I know one of your VIP customers," he remarks. "He will gain from the business I perform, therefore I'm hoping you'll grant me a loan." However, the bank boss dismisses him without hesitation. He gets a call from the owner that evening. "Did you use my name to try to get a loan?" The owner queries. He is forced to offer an apology. Surprisingly, the owner doesn't hold it against him and instead respects his conviction that he won't let up until his objective is accomplished. He obtains the first loan of his life from the bank and purchases the property since the owner chooses to guarantee the loan for him. A black guy is at the door of an elderly white woman who has just returned from her shopping trip. With a harsh tone, she says, "What are you doing?" With composure, the black guy responds, "I'm remodeling the apartment building." Putting on a cruel expression, the elderly woman says, "Workers like you should be careful." Bernard replies, "Don't worry, this is my building and I will definitely take good care of it." The elderly woman is left speechless, furiously walks home, and the cops show up shortly after. They inform Bernard that when an elderly woman phoned the police, they questioned him about whether he had contradicted her by pretending to be the owner. Bernard pulls out a copy of the real estate certificate out of the blue. It turns out he's anticipated problems and is ready for it. When the cops find out that the home really belongs to him, they become upset and depart. Bernard goes back to the apartment complex that evening. When the elderly woman at the door notices him, she advises him to go right away since the timing is not right for renovations. Bernard continues to respond composedly, saying, "I'm not a contractor. I am the owner now." The elderly woman is shocked, and a few days later she furiously moves out of the building because she doesn't want to live next to black people. Bernard lets an African-American woman live in the elderly woman's home as soon as she departs. As he predicted, the black tenant market is really quite large. Bernard pays the previous owner the agreed-upon follow-up payment when the building is promptly occupied. The previous owner, who greatly admires Bernard, extends an opportunity to collaborate on a commercial venture. The previous owner negotiates the sale and signs the contract with Bernard after he selects the home and determines his salary. They will share the income and not disclose to white people that they are doing business with black people. Bernard concurs without hesitation. The two have a very easy time working together, and they quickly become quite wealthy. Shortly later, Bernard also relocates from an apartment building to a mansion, giving his cherished family a joyful existence. This is his wisdom. He will not fight back when someone treats him unfairly, since doing so would force him to play by other people's rules. He wants to follow his own set of rules. His ultimate objectives are maximum profit and rational economics. But things don't always go as planned, and difficulties might appear at any time. A few years later, the elderly and fragile previous owner, who collaborates with Bernard, passes away unexpectedly. His wife inherits his stock in the business. This lady refuses to work with Bernard and actively discriminates against black individuals. If Bernard doesn't accept her lowball offer to acquire his shares, she threatens to sue him. She makes this insulting offer. Who do you think the court would side with in those days when black and white people sued one another? Bernard makes the decision to go to court because he will not put up with this unjust treatment. To demonstrate his cooperative connection with the previous owner, he needed to locate a witness. Though the bank manager comes to mind, he has already sided with the widow and is avoiding Bernard once again. Bernard, who is very dissatisfied, stands in the bank and scans the area. Everywhere throughout the orderly bank building, there are methodically discriminating fangs. When he enters the bank, he is often mocked only for the color of his skin. Bernard begins to formulate a daring scheme as he mulls over this. 4 banks are housed in one structure, and all of them have locked their doors to this black guy. Bernard had an epiphany at the same moment. I will buy this building and see who of you dares to discriminate against me again. Bernard then locates Joe, a fellow black real estate entrepreneur in Los Angeles, and shares his intentions with him. Because no black person has ever purchased property in downtown Los Angeles, and the building's land price is absurdly exorbitant, Joe first believes he is crazy. However, after some discussion, Joe learns that Bernard is a thoughtful rationalist rather than a guy suffering from delusions. What makes him desire to purchase this property? Because the bank inside will service him for as long as he owns the building. They won't dare turn down a loan from him. In order to facilitate his real estate business, they will also tell him about the current real estate trend. Although Joe is surprised by his suggestion, he thinks it will work after giving it some thought. Despite his enormous fortune, he is nonetheless vulnerable to white people everywhere. He will be richer if he can trot on white bankers on white territory. They still need a white person to serve as an agent since they are unable to directly negotiate deals with white people. Bernard already has one person in mind for this, Matt, who has been assisting him with renovations. This is an honest individual who is also very ambitious despite his lack of experience. Bernard and Joe then set out to provide Matt a full education, including real estate, golf, elegant manners, and mathematical reasoning. Matt meets and exceeds expectations by picking up the game of golf fast. He's a young, bright entrepreneur who can do real estate assessments while he's out playing golf. Matt meets the bank building's owner at a golf club. Of course, Joe set up this meeting as well. The talk proceeds well. Matt is given the opportunity to purchase the building. The remaining amount will be negotiated. However, Matt lacks the necessary skills. Be at ease, urges Bernard. Bernard assists Matt with all of the preparations before to the negotiation. He begins by counting the number of lights in the building after dark, determines the building's vacancy rate, and then uses the property's yearly income and running expenses to estimate the building's worth. Prior to their appointment with the owner, Bernard urges Matt to commit any figures that may be relevant to memory. As a consequence, Matt is always one step ahead of the big boss and gives out the precise quantity, shocking him no matter how much he blusters about his property. Beside him, the accountant is also perplexed. They all believe they have met a math whiz and are completely incapable of tricking him. Bernard ultimately pays only $1.56 million for the building, which was originally valued at over $2.4 million. The president of each bank will now come to shake hands with Bernard whenever he enters or exits the premises. The little manager who had previously made his life tough is taken aback. The banking business helps Bernard and Joe's real estate careers grow quickly. All by themselves, they violate the tight zoning that separates Los Angeles' white and black populations. Black people who are young and promising go into white communities. They even have a reception from the vice president shortly after. Bernard returns with his family to Texas in 1963, some years later to see his father in Britain. Britain tells Bernard he's pleased at his achievements after their supper. Bernard takes his kid on a tour around town the next day. In little time at all, they find themselves in front of the bank where Bernard was employed as a shoeshine boy. Texas was the most racist state in the Union at the time. They run upon a small child who shines shoes the same way Bernard did when he was younger. The child will only work on white people's shoes, which surprises Bernard. Bernard is affected by this little encounter and becomes more conscious of his need to treat others with respect. He decides in private that he has to assist his hometown's black people get better homes and challenge the existing quo. When Bernard pays Joe a visit the next day, he advises them to purchase the Texas Mainland Bank. Given the extreme bigotry in Texas, Joe believes Bernard is insane for even considering it. However, Bernard is able to provide strong arguments for the acquisition. Ultimately, Joe consents to assist Bernard. They get Matt back on board and use him as their front man once again. To go over the deal's figures, they meet with Robert Florence, the bank's owner, both senior and junior. Florence Sr. sells the bank to Matt and his partners in spite of Florence Jr.'s misgivings. After acquiring the mainland bank, Bernard goes to work assisting the local African Americans in obtaining loan approvals. It seems that Bernard wants to provide his fellow males an equal opportunity at housing and even financial prospects. Everything goes well for a while until Florence Jr. begins looking into the loans that their bank has authorized. Florence eventually pursues Matt and runs into Bernard and Joe. He challenges them on the loans they authorized and issues a letter threatening action from the U.S. Treasury Department. In a month, he claims, the department will examine the bank's activities. The boys talk about their next course of action after Florence Jr. departs. In the meanwhile, Matt makes a recommendation. He advises them to purchase a different bank and move the problematic debts from the mainland to that bank. They spoke about buying Marlon Moore's bank, and Bernard believes managing the business operations is the biggest challenge. Matt proposes that he be given the opportunity to lead the new bank in response. Although Bernard is uncomfortable with the notion, he ultimately agrees to let Eunice watch Matt. Ultimately, Matt gets to manage his bank the way he has always desired. Matt meets with a lawyer the next day and begins signing loan documents using his signal. After a while, Matt gets a call from Florence Jr. about some customers who wish to take their whole balance out of the mainland. The situation is exacerbated when a federal bank examiner comes to Marlon to assist Matt. Bernard makes himself seem like a janitor in order to fit in during the conference. Regretfully, it doesn't matter since the examiner finds a serious issue with many loans. Bernard can't believe the ridiculous loans were accepted. They eventually discover that Florence Jr. was involved from the beginning. As it happens, in his haste to manage his bank, Matt broke precedent and hired a lawyer Florence suggested. Florence was able to slip in the troublesome loans by doing that. Later on, Bernard and Joe inform Matt that leaving the Bank of Marlon is the most sensible course of action. Matt moves without informing his partners, unwilling to let his bank go. The next day, Joe finds out about his relocation, and he and Bernard go to the mainland bank. Florence, wearing a proud expression, observes the spectacle as they confront Matt about the debts. Matt is told by Bernard to get their books, but it's already too late. To revoke the mainland bank's operating license, the federal bank inspectors show there. Bernard and Joe are detained by the FBI as they are leaving the building. Bernard makes an ineffective attempt to hold his ground. Bernard and Joe meet with their attorney after a while. They find out that the nation's racial politics were entangled with their case. In the meanwhile, Matt discusses testifying against his partners with Senator McClellan in return for his release. That evening, Matt calls his phone while he mulls over his next course of action. The next day, Matt gives a testimony against his partners before the Senate hearing, acting on McClellan's advice. Bernard meets with McClellan later that day and hears his proposition. Bernard is given the option to accept an immunity agreement and verify Matt's testimony, or he may say whatever he wants and end himself in prison. Bernard ultimately makes the decision to speak the things he has been holding within for a long time. He discusses the nation's racial prejudice. Soon after the hearing, Bernard and Joe's lives were completely turned upside down, and they were both given federal prison sentences. For a little portion of what Bernard and Joe spent, Florence Jr. buys the mainland bank. Matt Steiner, however, was never charged with anything. Bernard and Joe are released from jail after a number of years. Eunice thinks it odd that after losing all of their wealth, the two men still seem content. As it happens, it is not at all the case. Joe discloses that they own homes in the Bahamas adjacent to one another. Eunice asks Bernard how things occurred, looking at him in shock. As it happens, Matt's phone caller the night before he testified was Bernard. He apologized to Bernard and informed him about the senator's arrangement. Bernard requested a favor from Matt in exchange, to wait until the authorities could confiscate their belongings. The film closes with the revelation that Joe and Bernard still own two mansions adjacent to each other in the Bahamas, and that their residential properties played a significant role in the struggle against housing discrimination in Los Angeles.